Well, it's Friday, Bethany. Welcome to the Friday devotion. I mentioned last time that we would start the other post resurrection stories from the other Gospels, but I had left a story out that I want to lift up today. I was thinking about this yesterday. It's from the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verse 20. This is often not one that's talked about much. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. He was the one who had reclined next to Jesus at the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that is going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Follow me." So the rumor spread in the community that this disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who is testifying to you these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. But there are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. I thought about this because we often want to compare ourselves to the other. Jesus just gets done telling Peter how Peter's going to die for the gospel, that he's going to be put on a cross. And Peter and Jesus are walking away, and John's kind of following them because that's who we think the disciple whom Jesus loved is John. That's why this gospel is named John. And they're walking away, and Peter kind of goes, "Hey, what about him?" See, it was always Peter, James, and John. That was the inner circle. You had the disciples, which went 100, 150, sometimes up to 3,000. Then you had the 12. Then you had the three, Peter, James, and John. It was those three that went up on the transfiguration. It was those three that went out with him in his prayers. They went a little farther. That was Jesus' inner circle. John would be the youngest of the three. So Peter says, "What about that guy? What's going to happen to him? You've told me what's going to happen to me. What's going to happen to him?" And Jesus says, if he lives until I return again, what does that matter to you? I often find myself playing this game. Okay, Lord, if you want me to do this, what about that guy? You're calling me to do this. What's that pastor over there doing? Why is he being treated different than me? What about him? What about her? What about that person? We often want to compare ourselves to the other. But they have their lives. We have ours. Sometimes our lives seem to get so hard that we want to say, "Why can't I be like them?" But we don't know the difficulties of their lives. We don't know what's happening in their lives. There's an old poem, one of my favorite poems, called Richard Cory. Matter of fact, the Simon and Garfunkel sing the song Richard Cory. And the story goes that this man is saying Richard Cory was the richest man in town. He had millions of dollars. He had all the women he wanted. He had a great big mansion. But me, I just worked in his factory. I was one of his laborers. I'm a nobody. And the poem goes on about how admiring this person is of Richard Cory and how he wished he could be like Richard Cory. "Oh, but I just work in his factory. I wish I could be like Richard Cory." And then one day, Richard Cory went home and put a bullet in his head. We sometimes think that the other's life is better than ours. And we might see that they have all these things that might be good, but there's something missing. There's something wrong. We all have our struggles and difficulties. Richard Corey tried to hide it with all his wealth and all the women and everything. But there was something missing, a darkness in his life. Peter, hearing how he's going to live his life, wants to know how he's going to live his life to the end, how he's going to die. Wants to know, well, what about these others? What are they going to do? And that doesn't matter. We're all called to our own mission. We're all called to show the gospel as best as we can. We're all called to show love. To show love to the Richard Coreys of the world. To show love to the factory workers. To show love to the Peters of the world, and to show love to the Johns. To even show love to the Judases of the world. See, that's what we're called to do. We can spend our whole lives comparing how we are different or better or worse than the other, but in reality, God sees us all as children. We're all beloved. We're all special. And what we see as greatness might actually be a burden. I often think all this stuff that I have, in reality, I may not have it. It might have me. It might control how I behave, how I act, so that I don't upset anybody. You know, some things that we see as great end up not being that great. Sometimes our possessions possess us. Sometimes our power divides us. Sometimes our desires destroy us. But if we love, if we have love for the other, as we are, as they are, if we help those in need, if we treat the world as Jesus did, and stop comparing ourselves, we might see that we're all broken, that we're all in need of healing, that we're all in need of forgiveness. And then we would know that we all just need Jesus. Amen.